mindset needed. So risk appetite means ability to take downturns in your NAV, right?
Right.
But the mindset also needed is to make sure that you are there for the long run. What happens with large caps is that you are tracking FIIs. So in the nature of large cap investing, you always have to eye on your shoulder to see what is the other guy buying, because then that's what's going to go up. But in mid cap investing, you're more close down to the earth. But unless the market respects that view of yours, you're not going to make money. You might be right, but the market has to believe that you are right. So that is where the trick lies in mid cap, because it's not easy to know how other participants are behaving in the mid cap space. So by its very nature, right, you can't enter in mid cap investing without a 5-year time frame. So I would say that leaving everything else aside, because it's the quality of your fundamental thought process saying this sectors do well, this company is going to be a market leader and it's going to do well, and you've got to hang in there. And so the second point that happens, Joy, very good question that you asked me, is that because the market does not know the information that you know, you're obviously buying a mid-cap stock or whatever because you have certain knowledge about the quality of the company, whatever. I'm not going to inside trading part, so good knowledge. But everybody shares that knowledge. So when the market doesn't share it, the share price behaves differently to the economic performance. And that's where a systematic investing plan is absolutely critical in mid cap, because when you stagger your investments, you get to buy the same quality company at different prices. Rather than the timing effect, you bought it once. It might have been at a market peak, and then you're doing Rona Dona saying, "Yaar, good company, but it's not happening." So if you stagger your investments and keep a 5-year time frame, that rupee cost averaging, which is much bandied word, it actually comes to in practice because your goal is clear, right? Your goal is clear that in 5 years this company is going to be a multi-bagger. Keep buying it at various points, then your absolute gain is much, much higher than simply one simple buy and hold strategy.
Yeah. My second question is, Sunil, all through these COVID times, the theme was that the big is going to be bigger, right? So that was the thing everyone was talking about. But in some pockets, on hindsight, when you look at it, mid-cap stocks actually ran up faster than their large cap peers. Look at IT basket, for instance. What explains this? And was it a trend that some of us probably failed to catch?
Yes, I agree with you. So what happened is that mid-caps are cyclical is a general thought process everybody had. And what was being rewarded by the FIIs was safety. But the fact is that when large cap safety becomes too expensive, then there is a trickle down effect of that money into the safer mid cap. So mid caps are actually the bridge between small caps and large caps. So pharma companies in mid cap, IT companies in mid cap, FMCG companies, which are all from the safety sector basket, were present in mid cap. And what happens with the index, the beauty of it, or the bad part of it, is that the stock price rise itself alters this composition in the index. Are you getting me? It's a little bit like, in physics, there's a principle, right? At one point, you can't measure something without altering it. Either you choose measure or you can't observe. So like that, the very fact that FIs are chasing safety and there was a trickle down to safety sectors below the large cap meant that those segments of mid cap actually also, and in mid caps, it needs to be 10% of the money of the large caps because the liquidity of the stock, the free float is so less. Owners own so much that a small buy leads to a dramatic increase in the share price. So I think that the right thing would have been that to take this call that safety is going to be at play, but don't stick only to large cap. Look for safety-oriented sectors and stocks within the mid-cap universe. You would have been the best winner of this game.
Right. I really like the pie that you showed for the large cap index, the mid cap index, and the sectoral breakup that you showed. In fact, I admit that I have not looked at it that really so far. It was really interesting. There is this thing that I want to ask you. Yesterday, when Sensex peaked at 50,000, and everyone was looking back at the transformation that the index has seen over the last 34, 35 years. I'm sure there has been a similar change in the complexion going on in the mid cap as well as small cap space, especially we have so many IPOs coming in now from different sectors. Uh, what are your projections like? Would you see some new sectors coming in a dominating position, or maybe as an emerging theme in the mid cap space or the index itself?
Absolutely. So I think that it's going to be the digital services play. See, for a clue as to what's going to go forward in mid caps, the best place to look at is the private equity market, the venture capital private equity market, because that money has come in ahead and those companies have been built up. But the ultimate takeoff for that venture capital of the private equity is the stock market. So where that money flows, that's going to hit the market. So I think if you check the trail of the private equity investment, then you will find that clearly the new age businesses. What has COVID done? COVID has destroyed the concept of traveling to work or go office specific time. It's liberated everybody thanks to what we are using, Zoom and everything else. I think the new age world is now suddenly catching up. And all these, what will happen is that venture capitalists will go take that company to the market where they feel the valuation has smashed out. So you will see that the buoyancy in the stock market is a second trigger. So first is that private equity money through FDI form has been coming in. The second is the buoyancy in the stock market now makes people feel that this is the right time to tap. And incidentally, the government is going to be one of the first ones to tap in this year through their disinvestment program. So you're going to have a whole bunch of PSU stocks to play around, and all of them enter in. So the other point I wanted to stress is that when a company does really well, then it enters straight away as a mid-cap stock because of the extent of the share price it goes in. So I think that the mid-cap place is going to be the most exciting space, because in an index or in a SEBI definition of mid-caps, you have 150 stocks, right? From 101 to 250. But if something enters at 249, something else has to go out. Are you getting me? So somebody enters the door, somebody has to exit the door. So I think it's the most exciting time for mid-cap investing, because the winners of the past are not guaranteed to be winners of the future. And this is where that information asymmetry, the amount of knowledge you can bring to the table, will play a huge part in the kind of multi-bagger returns. The mid-cap is going to deliver the best return, is going to be that mid-cap which fastest becomes a large cap.
Right. Sunil, we had this discussion yesterday about how alpha generation is becoming more and more difficult in the mutual fund space. There were panelists, some of them were suggesting among thousands of mutual fund schemes that we have there, very few will actually be able to generate that alpha, while others will probably become also that kind of thing. My question is, at the investors level, how do they make out which is going to be among the front runners, and probably which one is going to fall back? Some people said that if a fund probably which is not performing well for some time is can be the best bet, because it eventually has to perform, and probably it is sitting with a lot of low price stocks.
So two things here. What you spoke about was a law of mean reversion, right? So what goes up must come down, what goes down must go up. That's a very simplistic way of approaching this. But what I would actually say is that, see, in the reasons why this is true, that a large portion of funds are not beating their benchmark, is because in the large cap space, right, FIIs have dominated in a very polarized manner, and no mutual fund can afford to be as polarized as a hedge fund or a FII. So perhaps the theory of diversification has hurt him in this period, because a segment of the sectors in the index have shot up, and a fund manager worth his salt could have gone and taken such a concentrated portfolio. Certain portfolio managers may be able to do it, but not a fund. So in the last cap, the polarization of the rally and the fact that every domestic mutual fund manager was not aware of how long the liquidity rally is going to sustain from abroad. See, we are all only receivers of information. We don't have a clue as to what's going to happen from there, because it's not just about how much money gets printed, it's about relative to India, how the other emerging markets are performing. Now, India got the money because there's a TINA factor, there is no alternative. Because low commodity prices, low oil prices, were all favoring a importing country like India, whereas an exporting country like Brazil and Russia was getting hurt by the negative commodity cycle. So we got an undue share flows, but no fund manager sitting here, a large cap, The best skill is to know how much money is going to come into which stock and which sector. But this is where they were clueless. So that's the reason. I think the law of mean reversion will work very well here because I don't expect FI flows to continuously sustain. I think when the world recovers, when the commodity cycle recovers, you find that the same FIIs will shift the money into those markets because ultimately water finds its own level, money also finds its own level. So when that happens, when FIIs flow, mutual funds will start buying, then the fundamentals of investment, which is to study companies and sectors and buy, and not just look over your shoulder at what my neighbor is buying, that will come to play. So I think that over a period of time, that will happen. In the mid and small cap segment, something very different happened, and I referred to it in my previous answer. There was trickle-down effect on the sectors, right? Now, problem again, same problem for a mid-cap fund manager, small cap fund manager. Most mid and small cap funds were heavily centered around domestic industrial growth historically. And these stocks, even though they could see that the FIIs are going to be buying safety, that trickle is coming, he can't get rid of the stocks for two reasons. One is that when he tries to go and sell a mid-cap stock, the price crashes because of the low liquidity. So there is always a $1 million question in front of a fund manager. This is a good company. I know it's going to do well. If I go and try to sell it, my very act of selling is going to bring down the price. So how many people, because as long as you have sold it, the correction in the NAV is temporary. Once you sell it, you're making the loss permanent. And it's a very, very tough call for a fund manager to take, right? So here again, the fund manager is hanging in there. Wherever he gets some liquidity, he reverts, but he can't shift his portfolio. But the index composition changes because the money flow changes it. So you take the same index, I show the sectoral composition, you take it 1 year back, 2 years back, fundamentally very different. Pharma would have been not even 2% of the index. Today is 9% of the index. Because the price appreciation of the pharma stocks made their weightage in the index go up. Now we're comparing for this mutual fund manager. Last year it had 2% pharma and he was outperforming. Now pharma has become 9%. He doesn't have a magic wand, so just goes buys and pharma rises. So the index tends to move in its own mysterious ways. And a fund manager, since he's got the fundamental approach and the 3 to 4 year outlook, has to take a very calculated call on do I do this. Now, how do fund managers play it? We've seen there are some which are beaten, but they have not beaten it in the right way. Why? See, for example, SEBI allows you 35% large caps in a mid cap fund. The BSE mid cap has 30% large caps. Now, there are some people who say, I will run a two to label mid cap fund with 80-90% mid cap. But some people will say, I don't care. Yeah. SEBI allows me 35%. I'll make my fund a mid and large cap fund and run it. So they would have outperformed in this phase when large caps were doing better. But tomorrow the tide turns. They'll be rushing to sell those large caps to buy more mid caps. But then those who have already bought those good quality stocks will outperform. So coming back to the point, I think the sensible thing is to just hang in there. And as long as you have invested in a fund with a long track record, you can see how it's done over back cycles. And the rolling returns analysis that I just showed is a very good way to analyze a fund, to see how it has done various cycles. Then you will realize that the fundamental approach of a mutual fund, right, is to deliver value over a 5-year time frame. So I would say that do two things. One is choose a fund manager with care, with a long-term track record. Second, even within mid caps, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Choose at least 3 to 4 mid cap fund managers and make sure they're different. Different in what ways? The fact sheet gives you what is their proportion of large caps. The fact sheet gives you what is their sector allocation. Do a little bit of study and buy a truly diversified portfolio. Buy one fund which has no large caps, one fund which has high large caps within the mid cap, buy one fund which is more industrials and cyclicals, buy one fund which has more pharma and safety. So when you do your own diversification across fund managers, then you are likely to have a less volatile journey because in your first 1 year, 2 years, one fund manager will deliver. In the next 3 to 5 years, another one will deliver. But stick to that. Once you've done your basic analysis and due diligence, stick to that for the 5 years, those 3 funds. And then at the end of the 5 years, look at your composite portfolio. Because in the first 1 year, something may have performed, last 1 year, something may have performed. Always evaluate yourself on the composite because that was the decision you made. So I think final answer is that diversify across very, very differently positioned mid-cap funds. That's the best way to manage.
I had a pretty long chat with Prashant Jain on this platform yesterday, and he said two things. One, that he has a value bias in his investing style, and that has given him a lot of pain. And two, he said he keeps on believing in reversion to mean, but the buzz in the market is such that he now wonders if he should talk about this concept at all. Now, I know you may not be very comfortable commenting on a fellow fund manager, but I want to ask you this. Has something really changed drastically? Do we need to upgrade or maybe update ourselves somewhere or build in some new metrics in our Excel sheets?
Absolutely. So I think this whole concept of value in India is bullshit. Sorry to use a very strong word. Why I'm saying this is, if you see internationally, what is value, right? Value is something which gives you steady returns, the utilities, the thing, right? In India, again, you said don't take competitor's name, but I'll just take one. Long years ago, there was a fund called Query Pioneer, the Templeton India Growth Fund. The name was Growth Fund, but its style of investing was value. Because in India, value is only a trading of Garth. There is no true value in India. Why? What is Garth? Growth at a reasonable price. So when you can see growth and you feel the market has not understood that growth, respecting the growth, expecting that growth, and you go and buy, essentially you're a contra player. But the fundamental thesis is growth. It is not about value. The value theory came when Harshad Mehta came with his replacement cost theory. And he said that, this company to create now upfront will cost 500 crores. So let me buy the existing company. See, that kind of a value which was there in those days. But when India shifted into a growth phase, right, you're only trading different rates of growth and you're trading different perceptions of future growth. So value essentially arises. So effectively, then what happens to value funds is they all buy cyclicals when they are out of favor. Right? Now, what happened to Prashant spoke about? For him, the PSU banks have always been trading at a price to book far, far cheaper than private bank. So there is sick value looking at you. But the fact is the market is punishing that stock or that sector because they are never expected to compete with the private sector either in terms of efficiency or in terms of turnaround or in terms of managing NPA or in terms of not having a non-net interest margin component to that thing. So the value style. So I respect Prashant Jain a lot because he has stuck to it. It requires guts to stick to it. But to me, fundamentally, right, that concept of value, as long as India remains a growth economy, when India reaches a mature stage as an economy and everything is fairly well priced, then the value style of investing, right, comes into basically the replacement cost area at play and comes in. So to me, anybody who says I'm doing a value fund is actually doing nothing but a contra fund. He's just calling it by the name value. And value is only the differing perception. So value works well when it works in a close-ended format. When you enter cyclical when it's out of favor, and then exit it when it comes in favor. So it has to be a close-ended fund where you go and return money back to that investor saying, there is a value today because I believe that auto cyclicals or commercial vehicles are in a cyclical. I believe that 3 years time they will come out of it. Do a 3-year investment, but when that valuation realizes, in an open-ended fund, Prashant's problem is accentuated by the investor behavior. Let me complete this story. Because investors come into such value-based concept funds when their past returns are highest, which is when the value has been realized. It's absolutely the wrong time to give money then. But unfortunately, Prashant and similar based managers get lots of money at the wrong time. And he can't go against the mandate when he keeps investing. So that's why I said the whole market, the investor behavior plus India being a growth economy and the fact that there is so much information asymmetry still prevalent in India means that I don't believe that we need to use value investing. I think the growth-based investing philosophy will always outperform at least for the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe after
last I checked, Prashant portfolio is not too heavy on PSU banks, though. He's, I think, paying a lot of utilities and stuff like that. Anyway, this is my last question. We have to end this. Now it has become fashionable for fund money managers to talk about their own investment when they advise others. Would you like to tell us about your own portfolio, where your exposures are and how diversified you are, and which are the asset classes that figure prominently in your own portfolio?
Okay, so I'm a diehard mid-cap investor.
Okay.
Okay. The reason being, and that is reflected in the presentation I made, the reason being that they are in between the large caps, the small caps on the risk reward framework, number one. Number two, I believe that a mid cap is a small cap which has demonstrated its value and hence enter the mid cap. And then when it really fully explodes the value, it will become a large cap. So you're catching the mid cap at the right point because it has already demonstrated a certain value. So a small cap is a high risk event where you're buying something unknown and you're betting. But a
So
mid
you're
cap,
saying, about 40-50% in mid caps?
60%
Yes.
put in mid caps.
Yeah.
60% in mid cap. I don't invest anything in debt.
Okay.
Nothing in the fixed
And
income.
large cap, and you have some gold and real estate.
Gold, yes, I have, because I believe that you have to keep your wife happy. So gold is something that I've consistently bought up through my life.
Yes.
So I've done an SIP in gold, both through physical gold. Jewelers run SIP schemes. So Tanishq has been one of my things. So I've acquired a lot of gold, basically because it's also that it is your best risk composite, right? Whenever things go very bad, hyperinflation, war.
There are a lot of people in Bombay buying real estate. Are you putting in money some in real estate?
I do only opium-based investing. Opium is not like heroin. I'm not talking about the drug opium. I'm talking about other people's money. OPM. What I mean is that I leverage. So real estate has been one of my biggest wealth creators because I've always leveraged to buy real estate. You shouldn't put your own money. Rather take HDFC Limited or a banker's money and then put it in. You got to manage it smartly. You shouldn't over leverage. So the rental income from the property should broadly be able to cover 60-70% of your EMI. Right? So on that basis, consistently over my lifetime, I have used real estate in this way. But I have not gone and actually put capital into real estate. Right? I believe there the stock market is the best. And like I said, so roughly I would say my portfolio will be 60 within equities, 60% mid caps, 25% small caps, 15% large caps. And some of that 15% large cap happened because the mid caps that I bought have become large caps. But that's the way I have done it. And but for others, it would depend on their appetite and their age, all of that. So it's not a standard philosophy that would say. But I did put on a positive asset allocation, and as you saw there, right, I had I think roughly close to what my own portfolio was.
Thank you so much, Sunil. I'll have to wrap here.